All right, let's dive straight into this explainer. We're going to explore a pretty profound shift in how we approach our ambitions, our goals, really our whole existence. We spend so much of our time looking forward, right? We're calculating our legacies, planning the future, constantly wondering what comes next. And in doing all of that, we often completely step over the present moment. So today, we're unpacking some fascinating insights pulled from philosophy, athletics, and even screenwriting that are basically going to challenge us to completely reorder how we build our lives.
Our source material kicks things off with this really striking parable. Picture this. A crowd gathers around a wise master, and they are just desperate to ask him about life after the grave. They're pressing him for answers, completely fixated on this distant horizon that, let's be honest, they can't possibly verify. They just want to know what happens next. But the master, he just laughs. At first, he evades the question entirely. He points out that the folks who usually obsess over a life that lasts forever are, ironically, the exact same people who have absolutely no idea what to do with the life they have right now.
But of course, one disciple just refuses to let it go. He demands to know, is there life after death or not? And right here, the master pulls off this brilliant piece of philosophical jujitsu. He completely flips the inquiry on its head and says, is there life before death? That is the question. He's challenging them and us to stop fixating on the horizon. He redirects their attention to the unglamorous present, the only life they actually have any jurisdiction over, basically asking, hey, are you even living in it at all?
Section 1. The wrong question. Focusing on the far horizon.
Leo Tolstoy actually tackles this beautifully in his Calendar of Wisdom. He insists that literally every other inquiry we have, stuff about our fate, our legacy, what happens after we're gone, is totally secondary. All of that is downstream from one singular crucial question. How do I live my life in the best way right now? If you can answer that, Tolstoy argues, all the other questions just kind of answer themselves. See, we often look way too far ahead. We obsess over our legacy in the visible outer world while completely neglecting the ground directly beneath our feet.
Section 2. The inner domain, where real change happens.
So Tolstoy makes a really powerful distinction here. He argues that instead of trying to save humanity through these visible outward announcements, we have to save ourselves by doing the unseen inward work first. Outward change? Sure, it's visible. You can measure it, you can blast it to the world on social media. But that is not where the actual work happens. Outward change is really only ever the visible residue of inner work that's already been completed. Real living takes place in the inner domain, a place where changes can barely even be observed. It's all about correcting the sequence. You just can't fix the outside until you've tackled the slow, invisible work on the inside.
Section 3. The danger of performance, the cost of faking it. Author Ryan Holiday applies this danger directly to modern life, taking a hard look at parenting and professional boundaries. You know how it is. We build these walls to separate our work life from our personal life. And sure, that's healthy at first, but it can so easily curdle into this toxic concealment. Holiday points out that parents, for instance, often hide their internal struggles right behind those professional boundaries. They wrestle in total silence, internally panicking about how they're going to manage, all while putting on this brave face. Meanwhile, the person in the office right next to them is going through the exact same hell. We end up treating our inner life like it's a messy prop that has to be managed entirely off stage.
And that brings us to a pretty chilling warning from Paul Bourget. He says that if you compartmentalize and perform a fake version of yourself for long enough, well, that performance eventually wins. If you're constantly performing one version of yourself at work and hiding your true struggles at home, eventually you'll actually stop thinking your own thoughts. You'll literally start thinking the thoughts your performance requires. Having coherence between your inner self and your outer self isn't just some nice touchy-feely idea. It is honestly the absolute only way your inner self survives.
Author Steven Pressfield highlights this concept of coherence brilliantly by pulling a screenwriting note from the film Silver Linings Playbook. He calls it Crazy's Rules. The whole idea is that if a character commits fully to an inner premise, even an entirely irrational one, like a weird superstition, they have to follow it all the way through, with absolute integrity and rising emotional truth. Because a half-committed superstition, that's just an awkward performance. But a fully committed one, that creates genuine coherence. It feels lived rather than just acted. And whether you're writing a script or living your life, you've got to commit to your inner truth to avoid becoming a flimsy act.
Section 4. Vessel before engine, the architecture of true strength.
Let's think about this through an athletic metaphor. If you want to be a truly resilient athlete, you don't start by building a massive engine. No, you start by building a sleeker vessel. You focus entirely on the frame. Movement quality, endurance, strength, all of that has to come first. That is the slow, tedious inner work. It's only once the tissues and joints are fully prepared that you can safely add the engine, the speed, the explosiveness, the outward capability. The source text gives us this perfect visual. You would never bolt a massive Ferrari engine into an unprepared Volkswagen frame. If you do that, you don't produce athleticism, you just produce a spectacular crash.
Confucius actually explicitly warns against this exact imbalance when it comes to thought and action. He says, knowledge without practice is useless, which makes total sense. You can't just stay in your own head forever. But the flip side, practice without knowledge is dangerous. Taking forceful outward action without first building that inner foundational knowledge leads to breakage. Action without foundation or force without a frame, it's incredibly destructive. That inner architecture just has to be built first.
Section 5. From Foundation to Force, Tending to the Inner Life.
Here's the catch, though. Staying in that vessel building phase requires something very specific and, quite honestly, very difficult. Humility. The reading defines humility quite bluntly here. It says being humble means being willing to humiliate yourself. Why? Because you have to actively choose the slow, unimpressive, unglamorous inner work over the visible, flashy outward speed. Building a foundation is practically invisible to everyone else. Actively choosing movement quality over speed, choosing the inner domain over the visible outer one, that is the humiliation that true humility demands of us. And honestly, it's the mandatory price of admission if you ever want to safely open up the engine.
But once that frame is finally built, then you can ask for the engine. Look at this exact sequence for safely externalizing your inner domain. A dream written down with a date becomes a goal. A goal broken down into steps becomes a plan. And a plan backed by action makes the dream come true. You see? This is the outward force finally being unleashed, but it's only safe and it's only truly effective because the frame now actually exists to hold it together.
So it all comes down to a really strict order of operations for true, lasting success. You absolutely must have presence in the moment before you start worrying about your performance. You have to achieve inner coherence before outward expression. You must build a sleeker vessel before you try to install a bigger engine. Put simply, you need the frame before you apply the force.
Which brings us right back to where we started, to the Master's redirect. Is there life before death? Well, yes, there absolutely is, but only for the person who is willing to build it in the proper order. If you're constantly looking out to the horizon, trying to bolt a Ferrari engine onto a fragile frame, you are missing the present moment entirely. So the real question you have to ask yourself today is this: are you willing to do the quiet, unglamorous inner work of building your vessel right now? Or are you just performing a life while waiting for the future to begin? Because everything else, the far horizon included, it can wait.